Hi folks, welcome back to another video. In a previous video we looked at how to install Ubuntu Linux using the Windows subsystem for Linux on Windows 11, and now we're going to look at how to use that built-in Linux implementation to install Redis server so we can use it for local development. So if we click on our start button and we can just search for Ubuntu, hit enter, and it'll bring up our command window with our Ubuntu implementation. Now it's automatically logged in for us, so we're all set, ready to go. Now, the first thing to do when we want to install Redis is to add in an additional repository. So now we're calling sudo, which is basically runs the command as root, and then we're using apt add repository to add the Redis repository to the apt package manager. So we enter that in, it asks us for our password. Okay, so that's now busy adding the repository. So we can hit enter to continue. That'll then add in the repository. Now that allows us to get the up-to-date application files for Redis from their repository. Okay, so the next command we need to do is apt update. Now what this basically does is it goes and searches for any updates that we might have on any of our local repositories. Okay, so it's saying there we've got 78 packages to be upgraded. So we can now go and run sudo apt upgrade. And this is basically like Windows updates on Windows. So this comes up and says all the package that needs to be updated or upgraded and asks us to confirm that we want to upgrade them. So that'll then go off and upgrade all our packages. It's a good idea, especially on a new Linux implementation, to do all your updates to make sure that you're up to date before you get started. So I'll just let this run while it updates and then we'll jump back into the video. Okay, now that all our updates are done, the next step of the process is to actually install the Redis cache server. So we would go sudo apt install Redis server. Now that'll go off, ask us to confirm that we want to install Redis server and Redis tools. That'll then go and install Redis server, install the Redis tools, and create a Redis database. So we can now start Redis up by sudo service Redis server start, and it's starting the service. So now that's now running on its default port in its default implementation, but there's nothing really to see. So what I also like to use under Windows is RedisInsight, which is a great little graphical user interface that we can use to display what's happening with our Redis server. So if we just put in our email address, okay, looks like it's asking for all sorts of information. And I am in Australia. Okay, must be a phone number. Okay, so 503-1212. That's the example they gave. I don't want to give my phone number, so they can just get the sample. So now this is downloading the RedisInsight installer, which we can then run once it's finished downloading. So now RedisInsight is installing. We can close down our browser or minimize it. And we've got our RedisInsight, which will allow access through our firewall. Now, if we minimize this, we'll go, yes, we've read and understood the license. And you can see immediately it's come up and it's picked up our local host 6379, which is the default port for Redis server that's running on our Ubuntu installation. So if we click on that, it then loads up and we can see that we can see our keys, we can add a key, we can see the CPU and memory usage and storage usage, and we can even add a key if we want. So we could add a string, we could call it our string, our value. Okay, now that's added that string to the cache. If we refresh, we can see we've got our string. Now there's no expiry limit or anything on the string or on the key. So we can then go in, we can see our value, we can delete it, we can edit it. If we deleted it and go to add another key, we can then set a TTL as well. So when you're dealing with cache objects, they typically have a TTL, which is a time to live. So might be 30 seconds or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on the data that you're putting in that cache key. So now in a future video, we'll go through and we'll look at how we implement this with a .NET 6 Blazor server app to add some backend caching so we can do development tests on a Redis server when we'll be looking to deploy the live server across to the Azure Redis service. So we'll look at that in a future video. Thank you.